Welcome to Section 7, Puppet Testing and Puppet Troubleshooting. At the end of the section, you'll know how to, test and troubleshoot Puppet. So we're going to be covering Puppet with some third-party tools and kind of connecting them all together and see how Puppet kind of fits into this whole DevOps testing and troubleshooting topology. I have this section divided into 9 topics. We're going to start here with testing and troubleshooting. We're going to go on to using RSpec Puppet, then move on to using Beaker and learn the basics of testing with Beaker, then move on to Test Kitchen for test-driven development, and then we're going to move on to Jenkins and we're going to tour the Premier CI/CD tool. From there, we're going to segue into the Puppet APIs and learn about the Puppet APIs, or basically how to get in and out of Puppet. The next topic, we're going to talk about SSL certificates, and specifically how SSL works between the master and the agent. Then we'll move on to metaparameters and ordering and learn how to use metaparameters in Puppet. And finally, our last topic in this section is we're going to use Pry, or how to inspect the Puppet server with using Pry. So let's get started. Testing and troubleshooting. In this topic, we're going to set the table for the other topics in this section. So in this video, we're going to go over Confluence and Jira and also a self-assessment. Now before we get into the X's and O's of all this, let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that we can use. Now we're talking here about concepts and measurements and return on investments and how we can measure the impact of DevOps. Now we can use various tools to do a lot of this forecasting for us. The first I want to show you is Confluence. Confluence is a good tool used for collaboration of DevOps teams. It also has some really good tools that we can use for metrics, and we can measure the performance of DevOps teams and give us a little bit more of view on our investment and our return on investment. Another tool I want to show you that's very popular is a DevOps tool called Jira. Now Jira is from the same company as Confluence, but what Jira does is Jira is used to log bugs, and based on that is we get to look at storyboards and we get to look at different metrics on how different stories and different projects and different DevOps projects are impacting us, and we can also measure things such as production issues and provide feedback loops that go into those issues, where we could basically use Confluence to monitor code check-ins, and we could use Jira to monitor code performance. Now there's also some really good self-assessment tools out there. One is from Atlassian, which I'm showing you right here. And there's other ones as well, but this is a good one that's non-really sales-ishy, where it puts in where you could supply different metrics on your corporation and your organization and how you're using DevOps, and it gives you a nice self-assessment tool on where you're at with using DevOps, and if you're ready culturally to implement, the C part in comms, which is basically, identifying the culture of your organization. Now what I have here is I have a rudimentary comms metrics, or a matrix, depending on how you look at it. Now I have here 4 different categories, and some that you might see can have more. I've seen them as many as 8, but it's basically divided into the 4 categories. You have deployment frequency. That's how often you can deploy your application. We have the lead time for changes. This is how long it takes for your organization to actually push something into production if it needs to happen, like today, like an emergency bug fix. We also can gauge this on the mean time to restore. Now, in a comms framework, this is how long it will take to restore an application, or to basically back out a production version and to put the last known good version back into production. And then we have how long does it take to do that. And finally, we could measure the change fail rate. This is the probability that any bug that you fix in production will cause another bug. So basically, you can take all these numbers and then you kind of shake them in a hat and determine exactly where you're at as far as being a DevOps shop. Now, this kind of looks like a report card, and it's really not meant to be so. Because if you look at this closely, you might think that you're always supposed to be in the left-hand column. I mean, you're always supposed to be able to deploy quickly. You're always supposed to have fewer bugs. You're always supposed to have less lead time between changes. And you're always supposed to have a very low mean time to restore. Now, some of those are going to be fairly obvious when you're taking a self-assessment of where you're at in this. Mostly the mean time to restore and the likelihood of any bugs creating new bugs when you push them into production. There you have it. You should now have a good understanding of which tools that you would use to benchmark and record your testing and troubleshooting. We went over Jira and we went over Confluence. And also, you should have the resources available to you to do a bit of a self-assessment to define what your goals are and where you're at in meeting those goals.